Hello, Caydor here. My redemption shirt on today, and I am glad I wore it because I saw two movies today that I'm going to be doing the vlog for. And the first one was Wolverine. And Wolverine proved that X-Men Origins Wolverine was in fact not the death of Wolverine, because Wolverine is unkillable. Even when they try to make him killable. Yes, that's the driving plot of the movie. Partway through, they make it so that Wolverine can in fact be killed in the hypothesis. Their tests fail miserably because he'd rather rip out his own heart than die. Literally. Anyways, the movie was pretty good. Seemed like there were a couple of moments that might have been funny. I think it was more the delivery on Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, because he seems to love that part. About like Ryan Reynolds in X-Men Origins Wolverine. I know it's taboo to speak of that, but in the Wade Wilson parts at the beginning, he looked like he really, really loved the part, and he had it pretty well down. It actually wasn't him as the Deadpool at the end of the mix and match body parts, because he took one look at that and refused to do that part, because even he knew it was stupid. Which is why I kind of trust him to do the Deadpool thing. It seems like he'd have a pretty good head about the character. Anyways, back to the Wolverine. Wolverine is awesome. His main focus should be fighting samurai and beating up ninjas and mobsters and whatever else you feel like throwing at him. Most of my complaints about this movie come across as nitpicks, and I think it's because there's parts that run on long enough that make you go, huh? Like, about the time Wolverine gets shot, he wanders around for quite a while with a bullet in him. And goes back and forth between realistic and not so realistic. I think it's implied that Wolverine was going on rage alone, but he was bleeding. See, I'm not sure the exact time, but it seems like he was bleeding quite a bit longer than he should have. Because unless he was hit by blood thinners with the thing that took away his powers, I'll leave that a surprise because it was kind of dumb, I think. Even for comic book standards, it came across pretty silly. But anyways, I'm not sure how long it takes blood to clot. I think my worst cuts and bruises took maybe up to an hour on a day where it's running pretty badly. It seemed like he went quite a few hours still bleeding out of his chest wounds, and then like he gets stitched up, and like what's underneath the stitches has scar tissue way quicker than it took the blood to clot. Huh? And then, oh, at the beginning, it's Wolverine versus a samurai, and so of course they play up the power of the samurai sword. With the one in the beginning that's supposed to be named like the Separator or something, because it's supposed to be good for separating head and limb from torso. Pretty badass boast, but and I'm not sure if it works the same with humans, but I've broken down a handful of whole chickens in my time and separated the leg from the hindquarters. And a lot of times on joints, from what I've seen, if you get it the right spot, it's a clean cut anyway, because the ball part at the end isn't as tough as like the bone itself. You'd still have trouble doing the head, because I think you gotta go have a weird cut, but the samurai swords aren't really meant for decapitation. You may get away with like one or two if you get the right spot and don't hit a whole lot of bone, but after a while it's going to be the edge is going to be really worn because they're supposed to be really thin, because the folding technique of the sword is meant to compensate for bad metal and or make what little bit of metal they had stretch. And while in theory having a better metal would make the sword stronger, it's still really thin, and so you have to be careful with it. But let's see. I have something else, but I'll use that as a transition from the middle and just kind of a comment that's more about myself than anything in general. But anyways, then later on, Wolverine has gotten his regeneration back through a fairly badass method, but he's getting shot by arrows with ropes on them, and he doesn't try to cut the rope. And I can kind of understand towards the end when there's about like 6 or so on each arm, and it's pulling his arms tight so he can't move them at all. But the first couple go in his back, and yeah, I can hit that with my claw if I had one, which I don't. Just sad. Very sad. Anyways, and I understand it's meant to get him to the place subdued, and they do use a poison arrow, but I think it would have been better, and even though it would have basically been the same scene as, what is it, X-Men 2 or 3? Probably 2. Maybe even 1. I don't know, it's the one where he's getting shot with a ton of sleep darts and he still continues to fight on and then eventually falls over. But if they had, all of the arrows had been poisoned, maybe even poisoned with the ropes as he's cutting them, it's just making him exert the muscles, which will actually pump the blood through it faster, especially if it's hitting muscle instead of any sort of vein. And it's bad that I understand this, because I'm pretty terrible at anatomy. But what else about Wolverine? Supporting characters. A lot of the characters' motivations are mucky at best. I mean, you understand Wolverine. He's got a... what is it? Chronic, pathological... Let's go with pathological. Pathological desire to protect women. Especially those that are somewhere between being able to protect themselves and not being able to protect themselves. Because all of the heroic girls in this movie go back and forth. At times they can handle themselves, and other times they're taken down pretty easy. And it generally depends on whether they actually have a weapon at the time, because they fight back enough that it seems plausible when they're overpowered. But villains, it's hard to tell if they're evil or just dicks, because they seem pretty dickish. You got the grandfather who kicks off the plot by inviting Wolverine back, planning on taking his healing factor. And I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, Wolverine had saved him once and brought Wolverine over under the guise of wanting to say goodbye, when he actually wanted Wolverine to give up his healing factor so the old guy may live. I think his name was like Yashida. I don't remember the first name. I'm gonna try not to pronounce too many of the names because my memory is foggy, and I'm pretty bad with foreign names, which is terrible, but when a lot of them start sounding a lot like the one or two I do know, I only got because they scream it in the subtitles so much that I can actually look at it and get the hearing and the look, and I still may butcher those on accident. It's just because it's a name in a language I don't speak well or fluently, and I've tried to learn some of it, but it's a matter of the sounds. When one sound with 3 different inflections can mean 3 wildly different things, I have trouble with it. Because some days I have enough trouble understanding people who mumble in English, let alone in a foreign language. And so the old guy ends up dying, and it turns out he had left the company to his granddaughter instead of his son. And his son is pissed and kind of a dick. One point he slaps his own daughter and then proceeds to put a hit out on her. I wanted to punch the guy through the screen. He deserved whatever he got. I'll keep that a secret. And then you have the granddaughter, whose name is Mariko, I believe. And they say it often enough that I actually think I managed to pick it up, or pretty close to an approximation of it. And I enjoyed her character, which surprised me, because the other female lead playing off Wolverine, I don't remember her name. It wasn't said enough. But she's a mutant, and her mutant power is she can see people's deaths. And I actually think that makes a nice pairing with Wolverine, because at one point when he is mortal, she sees his death, or a glimpse of it. But what she saw actually turned out to be him going from the mortal to getting his healing factor back. And so she pairs herself up with the one person she can never see the death of. And I think that's kind of neat, because it's one of those powers that definitely seems like a curse, because she talks about when she was 5, she saw her own parents' death, and so I imagine she has trouble getting close to anyone after she's seen their death. And so I thought that was a nice pairing. But her introduction, she's got a, what do they call it? Sedai Rike? I don't know. It's the trope where you have a skirt of a certain length match against socks that go only up part of the leg, and the more it gets closer, the closer the socks get to the skirt, the more attractive it's supposed to be, or something like that. And she had red hair. And a year ago, I would have been all over that. But for whatever reason, thought she had an interesting personality, but red hair just did nothing for me. It's a shocker for even me. Because at one point, just seeing a girl with red hair would make my brain go dead. But, anywho, and the granddaughter, Mariko, who is like this odd mix of she's got like a rebellious side to her, but she seems somewhat trapped in the submissive role that they seem to imply that she's picked up from Japanese culture. And even the one that's paired with Wolverine has a similar, as a like sidekick or whatever, has a similar problem where when she's out and about and kicking ass, she's very dominant, but because she comes across as like sort of a servant to this household, she acts submissive when she puts on the kimono and goes into the traditional role. But Mariko, I just found her adorable. This odd mix of strong and weak and rebellious, and broke my heart when she had to do the submissive stuff, and at one point she almost jumps off a cliff before Wolverine saves her to escape her fate, and broke my heart when she was being submissive. And but then I had the same amount of joy later on when like Wolverine refuses to just go away and leave her to her problems after the Yakuza are after her, and she gets this like half rolled eyes look that's just marvelous. I think part of it might have been her hair. For some reason, I seem to have replaced the red hair thing with the like ponytail or bun with the sides coming off. For some reason, I find that adorable now. Couldn't exactly pinpoint when that happened. But anyways, that's Wolverine. Good movie, great action. Oh, there was one more thing. Towards the end, they bring in the Silver Samurai in a version that you wouldn't recognize if you actually read the comics. It's not bad, but it's kind of silly, and the movie probably could have ended before he showed up, but they make a video game out of it. They needed one big boss battle. But his suit was kind of meant to take on Wolverine, and so it's made of adamantium, and his samurai swords glow red, and you see it cutting through like metal and wall and stuff, so that it's adamantium and it's meant to heat it up so it could actually cut through Wolverine's claws, which is nice. But it should cauterize whatever it cuts through, because we see it melting stone. At one point, like, he runs a guy through with it and pulls it out, and the guy's bleeding. It should be more like the lightsaber from Star Wars A New Hope, where it cuts off the guy's, like, it cuts, or just about any Star Wars movie where it cuts off hand and head and there's no blood. It seals the wound shut. That bothered me. And it looks like I'll have to split it up. There will be an edit, but basically I won't edit it. I'm just going to turn it off and then start up the next one, because the mode my camera's in now only runs in 30-minute increments, and we're already at 20 minutes. I'm not sure that'll be enough to talk about Kick-Ass.